So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Geneva. We seek to meet you wherever you are on your journey and invite you to be part of this congregation in which we draw wisdom from all the world's religions, balanced with the insights of modern science. We seek to build a diverse, beloved community within our virtual walls and hope to inspire and accompany one another as we act for peace and justice in our larger world. When I was 11, kickball was my favorite game. In fact, it probably still sits in a pantheon of all-time favorite games, even though I haven't played in, 40 years. I just remember that deep sense of solid satisfaction when I really laid into the ball, just so, and saw it go sailing out into the outfield. It was probably one of the best things ever. As you probably know, kickball is like baseball, but you play it with this big red rubber ball. A pitcher rolls it at you, then you kick the ball and you run as many bases as you can. The fielding team tries to catch it in the air, which is an out, or smash you upside the head with it while you were running, which is also an out. Good times. The best balls were really springy, like really springy. You had to pump them up to almost bursting, or they just flop all over the infield when you kicked them. Not every ball could take this kind of abuse, but, well, let's just say that an inferior ball didn't always make it through the week. But Eric's mom always bought the best quality kickballs. And yeah, that was a thing. With Eric's big red rubber ball, kickball became an Olympic sport. We'd get dozens of neighborhood kids to turn out and play. One hot summer day, my neighbor Eric was having a less than stellar game. He may have been hungry or thirsty or just young, but whatever. At some point, he got his best kick of the whole day. It was a grand slam. He rounded the bases and everyone got home. It was a glorious moment in an otherwise frustrating day. And then the other team was saying it was a foul ball. Eric had kicked it out of bounds. Eric denied it. The names were called, insults were hurled, and right there in the thick of it, Eric took his ball and went home. And that was that. I remember being really mad at Eric. He ended our game. He just left. And he wouldn't come back either, not for love, not for friendship, not for anything. He was done, and therefore, so was everyone else. I remember thinking something like, yeah, he got robbed, but ending the game? How could he just walk away and not come back? I have words for that now, words that I didn't have back then. What Eric did on that summer day, when he lifted himself above the rest of us, when he prioritized winning over playing, when he prioritized being right over relationship, what he did was break covenant. And I remember being sad because our game would not be, could not be the same without him. It's a good time to pause and go interactive. So with our mics still muted, I'm going to remove the Zoom spotlight just for a minute. And what I want you to do is to go to your screens, and the upper right-hand button says View. I want you to click that and pull down to where it says Gallery. If you can all do that, that would be great. And if you haven't activated your camera, now is a great time to do so. You'll know everything is working because the screen will fill up with a ton of little boxes. Now, looking at those faces, your community, and in the spirit of our friend, the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III of Trinity Church here in Chicago, I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, oh neighbor, we must come back to the table. Amen. About a year, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, HBO released a TV series called Watchmen. Did anyone see this show? Maybe a couple of you. The TV show has it all. Frozen space squids, masked vigilante cops, and blue superheroes, all of which seems perfectly normal TV these days, given the success of the Marvel and DC comic franchises. But what was different about the 2019 Watchmen was the focus. This show explicitly explored the theme of white supremacy. In fact, the show opens with a rather horrific scene from America's racist past, the complete destruction of Black Wall Street. Has anyone heard of Black Wall Street? Maybe the Tulsa race riot or the Greenwood massacre, any of those? Some of you, yeah, sure. But don't feel weird if you haven't. The event is largely unknown and untold. It wasn't in my history books, for example, so I doubt it was in yours. Now, there's a lot to uncover with Watchmen, and I hope to do that in a future sermon. And the story of the massacre, I'm going to leave that to my wife, Julia, who is scheduled to come preach to us at a later time. All I'm doing here is peeking through this door as a background for what the descendants of those survivors taught me personally about covenant. The first and only time I've traveled to Tulsa was in 2018. It was for a seminary class while I was at Meadville Lombard Theological School. That class was the basis for Beloved Conversations, not coincidentally, the same Beloved Conversations class that I was asking you to explore this spring. And just as another aside, registration for that class did close this past Friday. If you're curious, and I will tell you that my hope is that you are curious, there will be another one this fall. Please do keep that opportunity in your plans. Now, while I was in Tulsa, I learned a lot of disturbing things. The class took a tour through the area that had been raided and firebombed by a white mob. I saw the memorials. We spent hours at the museums. We met the children of the survivors. And we learned that the founder of All Souls, our UU church in Tulsa, the church I was there to visit, that founder had helped to set off the riots that killed and injured hundreds, maybe thousands of American citizens. Again, we'll return to that in a future sermon, but you can imagine that these stories were shocking. My fellow students were horrified, angry. We wondered aloud how whites could be so vile. We wondered why Blacks in Tulsa chose to stay. We wondered how there could ever be peace, love, or understanding in a place where so much had happened, so much had gone horribly wrong. Many of you know that All Souls in Tulsa is the largest UU church, I think, in the world. UU churches never really reach mega church levels, but Tulsa would qualify. They have over 2,000 members and thousands more who attend. And right now they're working on building a brand new building located in the center of downtown. And I know they are hoping to open it in time to commemorate their centennial, which is this year. And yes, for those keeping track, that means that the All Souls Church opened the same year as the Tulsa Race Massacre. Now, the story of All Souls and their relationship to that massacre, that took a rather odd and I think beautiful turn in 2008 when Oral Roberts' protege, Carlton Pearson, asked his church, a predominantly Black evangelical church there in Tulsa, to sign the book at All Souls. If you've never heard of Bishop Pearson or the story of how a prominent Christian evangelical had his faith transformed by the message of universalism, that story is captured in the movie Come Sunday. I recommend it to you. I met Bishop Pearson while I was in Tulsa. I heard him preach, danced at the worship service he led, In my life as a UU, I have only been to a couple of worship services where we steamed up the stained glass windows, but I will tell you this, it was hugely fun. Our class asked him and the other leaders at All Souls, the senior minister, the executive director, the music director, the choir director, the gospel choir director, the RE director, the director of pastoral care. I think you're getting the point. They have a huge staff. But we asked them to tell us what it was like to live, work, and play at this time in a church with that much history and such vibrant diversity. A UU congregation where half the membership was not white. They told us something interesting. Life at All Souls was not perfect, they said. There was no big kumbaya when they merged the two churches. Black folks didn't just fold into the regularly scheduled Sunday services. No, instead they added a service. They added new programming. Everyone was invited to everything. And to be fair, many folks did go and do explore and also argue, get angry at each other, disrespect each other, and in many cases, not get along. Conflict apparently was and still is common. I have to admit, it was fascinating to hear them talk about it, openly admit friction and failure. It's not like the whole church was in turmoil at all. That's not at all. They were actually surprised that we were surprised and asking stuff like this. How else could it be, they asked. Conflict is totally normal. It's human. Of course, there would be conflict. Humans were involved. It reminded me of a saying that when you have more than you need, you build a bigger table and not a higher fence. And then when everyone has a seat at that table, the boisterous table of God, the table of fellowship, the table of all souls, it's going to be natural that at some point someone is going to do something or say something and someone is going to get hurt. When that happens, they taught me, people step back. The harmed do whatever they need to be healthy and whole. The ones doing the harm are invited to do the same. But the expectation is that everyone must come back to the table. That, I was taught, was what covenant was all about. Coming back to the table. That's what covenant is. Most of you, as UU members and guests, have some idea about that word. We usually talk about covenant like it's a contract, something that promises good behavior. UU groups meeting for the first time often create a covenant that includes things like step forward, step back, listen to understand and not just respond, use I language, stuff like that. And when someone misbehaves, we point to the covenant and say, hey, this is what you agreed to. This is fine stuff. But covenant is a bit more than an IEP or a behavior contract, isn't it? We can look to the Hebrew Bible, probably a good place to look for the word covenant. And we see that it is a relationship. It sits between a people, yes, but it is also between that people and God. In the New Testament and following Bishop Pearson, covenant is between all people and God. And as a good UU, I'm compelled at this point to say that this model works just as well if we replace God with nameless mystery or the spirit of life or the collective ethical aspirations of the unfolding human experiment or the transcendent mystery of love in an uncaring universe. The point is this: covenant is a relationship between us and something more. Something bigger than just you and me, bigger than even than us. That's where covenant lives. Covenant is a promise and more. Covenant is what lifts up our individual interests and guides our steps collectively towards something greater. Covenant is what makes individuals into a people. And it's a powerful idea. You don't believe me? The ancient Hebrews carried their covenant around in a box, and it made their armies invincible. A single glance inside the box would melt your face off. I mean, just ask Indiana Jones. Take our covenant. Since 1842, this congregation has had the same covenant. And as far as I know, it's been read aloud every Sunday since it was written. Think back to our friend Will. Some of you can probably repeat this verbatim just off the top of your head. But being desirous of promoting practical goodness in the world and of aiding each other in our moral and religious improvement, we have associated ourselves together, not as agreeing in opinion, not as having attained universal truth in belief or perfection in character, but as seekers after truth and goodness. It's a beautiful covenant. Personally, I love it. I think it's one of the best things about UUSG. As UUs, our understanding of covenant is bound by tradition, by each other, by the transcendent, and also by our aspirations. Tradition, each other, the transcendent, our aspirations. 4 dimensions. And as you can see, each dimension is represented in our UUSG covenant. So let me underscore something. Our covenant says explicitly that it is not a question of what we believe together, not as agreeing in opinion. Instead, our covenant is something we do together. We are here to aid each other in our moral and religious improvement. We have not attained perfection. Instead, we are here to seek truth and goodness. I like to think of this as the difference between orthodoxy, the right belief, and orthopraxy, right action. We believe many things, and as you use, that's pretty much a given. But our common covenant is what invites us, whatever our past and whatever our character, that what matters is what we do next. We are invited to make our actions be right actions and to choose that again and again. And that's important too, that again and again part, because we know that human beings are not perfect. We get it wrong. And while our covenant denies perfection, there is an expectation that we're going to keep trying. There's a quote that's attributed to the Persian poet Rumi that goes like this: "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come. Even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come yet again, come." Broken your vows 1,000 times. Rumi clearly knew we sometimes get it wrong. At church, we get it wrong when we hurt each other and pretend otherwise. We get it wrong when we think of church like it's a free Las Vegas buffet where we can just come and eat and leave. We get it wrong when we assume that financial support is someone else's problem. We get it wrong when right thinking is more important than right doing. We get it wrong when the church is about me and not we. We get it wrong when we lift ourselves but above the rest of us, when we prioritize winning over playing, with being right over being in relationship. When we take our ball and go home, we are getting it wrong. Today is the last day of Black History Month, and in the spirit of the stewardship season, I'm going to ask you for your support. Yes, certainly your financial support, your treasure, if you will, but also the support of your time and talents. You see, we have some work to do. Over the next several months, I'm going to be offering some classes. Some I will lead, some I will ask others to lead, but I'm going to ask you to think about joining them. Not every class is for every person, and not every person will be able to attend a class, and that's okay. Attend them if you can. I want you to think of them as offerings on our collective table. There will be a book club that explores issues of diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm hoping to add a movie club too. There will be workshops on implicit bias, bystander training, microaggressions, and how we can respond to them. There will be workshops on managing conflict and having difficult conversations. There will be opportunities to explore beloved community through beloved conversations. Consider these as opportunities of practical goodness offered up to aid our moral and religious improvement, to help us better associate together, because this is our covenant, asking us to do the work so all can come and come back to our table. Over the years, we've all made mistakes. We've done badly at home, at work, and yes, even here at church. We have broken covenant. And as Rumi taught us, we know that a return to covenant is something we will do 1,000 times. We are not perfect. We are human. Harm happens. But the important thing, the holy and sacred thing, is the return and making space for that to happen. So I want you to hear when I say that the point of these new offerings isn't to shame or indict anyone, not at all. The point is practice. As I've said before, following both DJ Smooth and the Reverend Vertus Johnson, the work of beloved community, the work of improving our character is not and cannot be a one-time surgery that removes a flaw or blemish. No, I wish. No, the work of moral and religious improvement is like dental hygiene. It's something we all need to do and do daily. This is what our covenant asks of us, what our covenant invites us to do. We aspire to do better, to aid each other, to seek together. And when we fail, when we don't quite live up to our aspirations, when we break covenant, we do what we can and come back to the table. How many times did the Christian God make a new covenant with the people of Israel? Any fans of the Bible? People have read this, right? The answer is many times. With Noah, with Abraham, with Moses, a couple of times with Moses, actually, with the prophet Jeremiah, and with Jesus of Nazareth. The question worth asking is why? Why so many times? And the answer is pretty straightforward. We've already heard it. We get it wrong. And it's striking that in those stories, God did not take his ball and go home. And neither should we. We must come back to the table, our huge, boisterous, joyous table. We are better when we are together. We are seekers after truth and goodness. This is the place where we choose. We choose what we believe. We choose each other. We choose commitment. We choose each other and our work, our deeds, our actions, our doings, our workshops, our committees, our pledges, our faithful covenant, a covenant that we make every week to each other, to this time, to this place, to each other. This is how we say we are here. And this is who we choose to be. Amen. And as we prepare to leave this place, continue your journey in love. Care for one another and care for this, our earth. Do justice and make peace. And as you go, know that whatever taste or touch you've had in this time and place of hope, joy, love, or peace, that goes with you out into the world. We are different for having spent this time together. So remember, live boldly and with thanksgiving.